In this CIE A-Level Economics video, we'll be going through indifference curves and budget lines. Specifically, 7.2.1, the meaning of an indifference curve and a budget line, and 7.2.2, the causes of a shift in the budget line. To get started, what is the meaning of a budget line? A budget line is a graphical representation of all possible combinations of two goods that a consumer can purchase given the prices of the goods and their income. Now let's look at this formula here. The price of the first good times its quantity plus the price of the second good times its quantity should be equal to a consumer's income. Now, focusing on the table we have below, suppose that Miriam has $1.20 to spend and wants to split her purchases between apples and juice. Apples cost 20 pence each, whereas the juice costs 40 pence each. She has to choose how to distribute her money between those goods, and all the possible combinations can be shown through a budget line. She can't consume beyond the budget line due to her constrained budget of $1.20. The slope of the budget line is given by the relative prices of the two goods. Now let's get to the meaning of an indifference curve. An indifference curve is a graphical representation that shows all the combinations of two goods that provide equal satisfaction or utility to a consumer. The consumer is indifferent between the combinations because they get equal utility from each. The slope of an indifference curve is also known as a marginal rate of substitution between the two goods, and it's equal to the ratio of the marginal utility a person receives from the two goods. The shape of an indifference curve is usually convex due to the diminishing marginal rate of substitution, which means that as a consumer substitutes one good for another, they're willing to give up less of one good for each additional unit of the other good. Let's look at this through an example. This is Miriam's indifference curve for apples and juices. At the second indifference curve, Miriam would receive equal utility from consuming 2 apples and 2 bottles of juice. And at any point along any of these curves, Miriam would be equally satisfied. Depending on her budget, we assume Miriam would like to maximize her utility by reaching the highest possible curve she can reach. For instance, she would prefer to be on the third indifference curves rather than the second or the first. Now let's talk about the indifference curves and budget lines together. Miriam can't choose which indifference curve she'd like to be on due to her budget constraint. Due to her budget, the highest indifference curve she could be on is the second indifference curve. At any other point along the budget line or below it, she would receive lower utility than this. The point in which the budget line and the indifference curve meet, so the tangency point, represents the consumer's equilibrium. It is the point at which the ratio of marginal utilities, which is the slope of the indifference curves, is equal to the relative prices, which is the slope of the budget line. Now let's speak about the causes of a shift in the budget line. This occurs when there is a change in the consumer's income or the prices of the goods. When there is an increase in income, it causes the budget line to shift outwards. Now the consumer can afford more of the two goods, so the slope remains the same as the prices of the goods do not change. A decrease in income causes the budget line to shift inwards because now the consumer purchasing power decreases. The slope will remain the same because the prices of the goods do not change. Another cause of a shift in the budget line is the change in price of a good. An increase in price of a good causes the budget line to become steeper because the consumer can now afford fewer quantities of that good. A decrease in price of a good causes the budget line to become flatter because now the consumer can afford a larger quantity of the good given their income. There's also other factors that cause a shift in the budget line, including indirect taxes, which increase the prices of the goods, causing the budget line to become steeper, subsidies, which reduces the prices of the goods, causing the budget line to rotate outward, and changes in currency. An appreciation or depreciation affects purchasing power, causing a shift in the budget line. Let's look at the shift in a budget line through this example below. Let's suppose Miriam receives an increase in her income, so her budget for spending increases. Given the prices stay the same for the goods, her budget line would shift outwards. As a result, she can receive a higher indifference curve from moving from point A to point B, allowing her to receive greater utility. This could also be applied the opposite way around. If Miriam receives a decrease in her income, her budget for spending decreases. Given that prices stay the same, her budget line would shift inwards. As a result, she would receive a lower indifference curve, so instead of being at IC3, should be at IC1. Let's look at this past paper question below. It's asking which statement about indifference curves is correct. Is it A, the indifference curves for inferior goods can show higher satisfaction on lower curves? B, the difference curves for normal goods show a diminishing marginal rate of substitution? C, the indifference curves for perfect complements go through the origin? Or D, the indifference curves for perfect substitutes are right-angled? I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to answer this question. The correct answer is B. The indifference curves for normal goods show a diminishing marginal rate of substitution. The diminishing marginal rate of substitution means that as you consume more of one good, you are willing to give up less of the other good to maintain the same level of satisfaction. Here's another past paper question. The diagram shows the consumer's initial budget line is GH and a set of indifference curves IC1, IC2, and IC3 for goods R and S. The original equilibrium for the consumer is point X. The inflation rate is rising faster than money incomes. What will be the most likely new equilibrium for the consumer if all real income is spent? Will it be B, A, X, D, or C? I'm going to give you guys another minute to answer this question. The correct answer is D. This is because if inflation rate rises faster than money incomes, the consumer's real income decreases. This causes the budget line to shift inward, indicating a reduction in purchasing power. This causes the consumer to choose a lower indifference curve, which represents a lower level of satisfaction due to the reduced real income. This is our last past paper question. The diagram shows the individual budget lines and indifference curves. The initial budget line is JL. There is then an increase in the price of good Y. Which distance represents the substitution effect of an increase in the price of good Y? Is it A, B, C, or D? I'm going to give you guys 1 last minute to answer this question. The correct answer is C. This is because the substitution effect measures the change in consumption when the price of a good changes. With utility held constant, after the price of good Y increases, the budget line pivots inward to GAK. The substitution effect reflects a movement from R to S, reflecting the change in consumption. The income effect causes a movement from S to T, reflecting the change in consumption due to the reduction in purchasing power. Thank you so much for watching and good luck on all your exams. Don't forget to subscribe and look at our other social media platforms.